I want to say on the outset of this, I want to make a disclaimer. I don't in any way claim that all of this is necessarily like biblical principles. Like, you're not going to find some of the things I'm going to talk to you about in Deuteronomy. Or, some of it's just things, like I'm going to talk to you about walking slower. That's just not in Leviticus. It's just not. So I'm going to talk to you about some things that I did, but all of it obviously it's gotten me a deeper life with Jesus. And this kind of stemmed out of a few people during this series asked me practically, how did you get to this place in your life where you were able to overcome overloads? So I thought I would just walk you through it, and then we're going to have some time in the end to talk, just have some Q&A. I don't know if you had really huge expectations. If you had huge expectations, I would tell you now, you might want to go to Jacob's group or Tom Thornton's or anybody. These are just principles that I've learned for years. So let's, it's been a long grind. I would say what I'm going to tell you tonight is probably the culmination of roughly 13 to 14 years of having to work on this stuff, like literally fight for it. So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of how I got there. Let me just start there. I began to notice probably around 2001, 2002, 2003, somewhere in that world when I was pastoring at Belmont Heights, I just began to notice something was off. And it wasn't a sin problem. It wasn't, I wasn't depressed. I wasn't heavy. The first thing I noticed, like most things, was a symptom. When you start getting, like, I'm really fighting allergies today, so I probably sound like I'm speaking out of a barrel. But I've got intense sinus pressure right now. Those symptoms are the first things you spot. And one of the first things I spotted was I was in a hurry all the time. And I wasn't just in a hurry, I was in a hurry in my heart. I was in a hurry in my mind. I'm a polar extrovert. So I know it's bad when people start to bother me, because when people start to bother me, it's not good. Like something's out of whack. And so I don't know how I did it, and there's no rhyme or reason. I thought I kind of started, my schematic for tonight, I really am going to start you with where I started. And overcoming overload, the first place, oddly enough, that I began to notice that something was going on was when I read this book called The Life You've Always Wanted. And John Ortberg is one of my favorite writers. He is a Presbyterian minister, but he was one of actually the main teaching pastor for Willow Creek at Bill Hybels back in the heyday there. And Ortberg's a great storyteller. He's a great speaker. And so, it started when I read his book, The Life You've Always Wanted. Now, I want to tell you about this book in that I've probably read this book 10 times. No kidding. I've read chapter 5 probably 20 times, maybe 30. What I love about this book, anybody, raise your hands high. Anybody in here ever heard or read of a guy named Dallas Willard? Raise your hands high if you had. Yeah, okay. So Dallas Willard is... he's in heaven now, but wicked smart. I'm talking about like C.S. Lewis smart. I mean, just that kind of guy. Like I read Dallas Willard, no kidding. I'll read him like a few pages at a time, and I will literally put it down and go, okay, I think he's saying this, but I'm not sure. So he runs deep. Well, John Ortberg, he's big on spiritual disciplines. I don't know if you know what spiritual disciplines are. Some of you probably do, but some of you maybe never heard that term. Spiritual disciplines are things like prayer, confession, fasting, solitude, things like that. So Dallas Willard wrote The Spirit of the Disciplines, which is a classic, but it's deep, man. Don't like take it to the beach because you're not going to have fun. Ortberg said, when I wrote The Life You Always Wanted, I really thought about titling it Dallas for Dummies. And I thought, that's my kind of guy. I'm going to pick up, because I've never been accused of being Spurgeon, ever. So even in the books I've written, they're pretty simple, and I work hard. I work hard to be simple, actually, but Ortberg this is where it started. So every chapter in that book is different. So you can read chapter 6 first if you want to. They don't touch the chapters. But when I read the chapter on hurry, I began to realize that something was really wrong with me and how I was living daily. That first encounter, I think the Holy Spirit began to open my eyes to things I was missing because of a pattern of the way I was living. Ortberg has a quote in this book that completely wrecked me. I mean, just wrecked me. This is what he said. The real danger is not that we will renounce our faith, but that we will settle for a mediocre version of it. And that really hit me hard because I realized that, and I'll be honest with you, you know, I had heard about the soul, I had read about the soul, I've sung about the soul in worship, but probably 17 years ago was when I began to be a little bit intrigued about what is this thing God gave me called a soul. Because I'm going to tell you right now, Southwestern Seminary, we just didn't talk a whole lot about souls. We talked about getting saved and how to run churches, but we didn't talk a lot about the inner life sometimes. Certain classes you could take would do that, but the inner life is kind of, because you know what? It's a little bit of a mystery, let's be honest. It's a little bit mystical, you know? And I think sometimes we get a little afraid of it because we don't want to be New Age. We know that we don't want to drift off into bad theology. So like a lot of things, we just don't deal with any of it out of fear. And so that's kind of where I had been. If you want, I will say this on a side note. If you want another book that recently came out that will really help you, there's parts of it you may not agree with, and that's okay, totally. But Soul Keeping by John Ortberg is phenomenal. There's parts of it, you know, I really hope you understand. You know, you need to read everything with a filter. You need to read everything with a filter. And I've got great friends that are Calvinists, and I've got great friends that are Foursquare. I mean, all the way to the end. Pentecostal. I got friends that make Pentecostals uncomfortable. You know. So you know that's just something that doesn't bother me, because here's the reality, and you're going to hear me say this over the years at ClearView. If you operate only in a circle of people that believe exactly what you do to the jot and to the tittle, you are going to operate in an incredibly small circle in life. And I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about I know people, and I've met people that they believe what I believe about Jesus, believe what I believe about, you know, the Bible and the Holy Spirit and how you're saved and heaven and hell and all that. But I mean, if you don't line up with them on every little thing, you're not good, you know, bad. So that's just not me. I think even in evangelical circles, there's some room to move on some things. And so the soul can be, but I will tell you this, and because it was true with me, it felt a little weird. It felt a little weird thinking about my emotions and what part am I responsible for and what part is the Holy Spirit's job? And you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a little psychology with a little theology, and some of that kind of does that sometimes, and it's kind of hard to always know. So that's kind of how the thing, but I'll start with, let me start with telling you what I talked to you about a symptom. Let me talk to you and walk you through a couple of symptoms. Let's go to the next, yeah. So I'm going to walk you through I just thought through about a week or two ago in preparation for tonight, a couple of symptoms that I identified about myself. The first one was hurry. I told you about that. I found myself in a hurried mind. And I've told you, if you've listened to this series, hurry is a symptom of a disordered life. Hurry is a symptom of a disordered soul, a soul that's out of whack. And that was true. Another one for me was foggy. I was foggy often. And this was even before the days I drank coffee. So, I found myself 15, 16 years ago, it wasn't that I was confused, it just, there was a lot in my head. A lot of, you ever feel that way? Like, there's a lot in your head. And so I didn't really, it wasn't bad, but I felt like I would get up in the morning and buddy, it was, hit the gas pedal and go, and I mean, whammo and blinders and just, knock it out. And you just collapse into the bed, you do it again tomorrow because that's what the American work ethic is about, and that wasn't working. Another part I found was I would call intensity. I found myself becoming a little bit intense. Not intense like I would yell at you, but I just found myself, you ever found yourself like going through a season where you're just easily agitated? Just a little bit easily. Yeah, some of you are in here going, yeah, it's called life after 65. Frustrated with some of y'all are looking at this going, Jason, you're just getting older. That's what most of this problem is right there. I'm just going to tell you. But I found I put 19 days up there so I would remember to talk about it. This is when I knew I had a real problem. I'm not kidding. I was in the middle. Fast forward a few years, I had left Belmont. I was doing men's ministry things full time. I owned the operation. So now I've left being a senior pastor, and now I am operating a ministry full time, but also I have to go make it happen. It's on me to do it. No more tithes and offerings. I own the revenue stream, so I got to figure that part out. And I began to implode a little bit. I remember being in the parking lot of a coffee shop on Highway 96, and I stopped and I looked up, and I'm telling you, in that moment, the Spirit of God just flooded my heart, and this is what he said: it's been 19 days since you looked up. And he didn't mean like look up as in, oh, how are you doing, God? As in, it's been 19 days since you literally knew. I didn't know if it had been raining, the sun was shining, if it was cloudy. I was so tunnel vision in what I was doing that I literally did not know what day it was. I just had all this stuff I had to accomplish. So that's the fast track to burnout, if you're not already there. But those 19 days, I had literally not pulled my head out of the grind. Another one was I was impatient. I told you a little bit about that. I found myself, I'm a pretty patient person, but I found myself not being patient. Another one I would say data overload. I don't know what to call that other than my phone, I noticed, dominated my life. And that was before I had an iPhone. So, my phone, it felt as if it never stopped ringing. Text messages, I remember one specific day I had gone turkey hunting. I didn't take my phone with me. I left it in the truck on purpose. I came back to the truck about 10:30, and I had 19 voicemails. And that was typical. That was pretty common. 19 voicemails. And that doesn't account for probably 80 emails a day. I know people. I've literally talked to professionals as a minister that have told me my biggest fear about taking vacation is that I know when I get back, my inbox will have up to 1,000 emails waiting on me. So I literally know people that are trying to avoid the idea of vacation because they know it'll take 4 weeks of intense stress to make up for what they thought they were getting away from. No margin. That was another one. I noticed in my life there was just really no margin. I had no margin in the day. My calendar was full. But the biggest issue I would say would be diminished joy. I'm about to start a series, not this week, but a week from Sunday, on enjoying God. And what does it mean to enjoy God? You know, we struggle with that a little bit, right? But the fastest, one of my personal indicators when I know that my soul is getting overloaded is the funny goes away. And I don't mean funny and joking, just like I don't laugh as much. I don't cut up with you as much. You guys have probably figured out by now that I love to be picked on, and I like to pick on people. It's how I know I'm loved, and I really hope at ClearView, I would hope you give me at least 12 to maybe 14 months before you get offended by anything I say, because it's just, I try to keep. I believe we should take God seriously, but I don't think you should ever take yourself seriously that much. And I don't think you should be just a one big dummy, all the time. But I'm just saying, I really don't want to be a religious snob. I don't. And so, when I find my soul getting compressed, joy is one of the first things that goes away. And so it's kind of almost like a red light in my head that helps me know that I'm getting overloaded. The schedule's too thick. I need to do some things different. So those were some of the symptoms that I faced. I'm sure you faced all of them on some level. And that was the days before the iPhone. And so now I think it's actually even worse with technology. I know that it's worse. So let me talk to you now for a second on some what I'm going to call. Don't go to the next slide yet, but what I'm going to call some pathways out. Now I don't. These are just highly practical. This whole thing wasn't designed to be a Bible study. Okay, this whole talk tonight is literally just almost like Jason's experience. So I just want you to keep that in front of you, all right? So let me show you the first thing that happened to me, a shift in theology. Now, I didn't say a change in theology. I said a shift in theology. Actually, it really did start with me. That's where it started. If you listen to, I think it was the first part of the Overload series. Not the first part. I think it's sermon 4 or 5. It's when I split the Psalms up into one half and then the other. So it's the Psalm 23, part 1. If you go back and listen to that, I talked a lot about kind of hitting the end of my line, where I was sitting on my front porch one day and it was kind of coming in on me a little bit with an overloaded soul. And that was the first time that I really started to ask myself, did I believe in the sovereignty of God? I certainly believe in the sovereignty of God. I believed in it then. I had preached on it. But here's what I didn't know. Or I guess I say what it hadn't come full to fullness in my life. I knew that God made the heavens and the earth and the sunrise and the sunset, and he dictated all the big things. But what I had yet to understand was that God got, and I really hope you hear this, that God gets just as much glory in the little things as he does in the big things. And where I had not realized his sovereignty was that he wasn't just sovereign over my salvation and my eternal security, but I wasn't allowing him to be sovereign over things like how I scheduled my day or how I took a meeting or the fear of if I don't take this meeting, what if I move backward? Like I remember there was a point, I don't know which book it was in. I want to say it was in The Life You Always Wanted, where Ortberg goes to Dallas Willard. And when he told this story, I went, yes, I have felt that. He went to Dallas Willard and he said, my life is consumed, my life and my schedule is consumed. I'm in a constant hurry. And Dallas Willard told him, you've got to radically eliminate hurry from your life. He said, but I've got all these speaking engagements and his books sell really good and I've got all these opportunities. And he said, you've got to radically eliminate hurry from your life, John. And then Ortberg said this to him, but what if they don't need me anymore? So if I take a break for a year, what if they don't need me anymore? And that describes where I was living. If I let my foot off the gas just 1/10 of 1 ounce, what happens? I mean, you know that old cliche, make hay while the sun's shining? Yeah, buddy. I was driving a tractor with a sickle in both hands. You know, cutting every ounce of hay I could while I had a chance. And it was killing my heart and my soul. So once I began to understand the sovereignty of God over my life and that I was truly living a life that was really out of pace with the Holy Spirit. And here I was, a minister. I wasn't sinning against God. I just was overloaded. So couple that with many years ago, oh gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was doing this event for Lifeway and out in Montana, and I encountered this pastor. No, it was in New Mexico at Glorieta, and then we ended up doing one for Lifeway in Montana, and he was at both of those events. And this guy was a phenomenal psychologist. We were on the river one day fishing, fly fishing, and it was the first time anybody had ever explained the soul to me in a way that I could understand it. I mean, I want you to think about this. How many books have you ever not even read, but how many books have you seen on church growth? Hundreds, maybe thousands. How many books have you seen on, marriage? Thousands. How many books have you seen on the soul? I might have just shown you the only 2 ever, right? I mean, they're just not that many out there. And when I began to unpack this verse, I really understood. So let's look at it. And I showed it to you the first couple of Sundays. Paul said, now may the God of peace himself, 1 Thessalonians 5:23. 1 Thessalonians 5:23, now may the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely. What does sanctify mean? Set you apart, right? And may your spirit and your soul and your body be preserved complete, without blame, at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Spirit, soul, body. The spirit's the eternal part of you. The body is what we know it is. But then there's that thing inside where I've shared with you for weeks that the Hebrew word and the Greek word are pretty close together. It is the seat of the emotions. The Old Testament Hebrew and the New Testament Greek would have been pretty aligned, that your soul is the mind, the heart, the will, the emotions. The best way I've told you that I could ever describe it to somebody is when we say things like, what does your gut tell you? That's your soul. And the Lord obviously has sovereignty over that. But if you look at what David said in the Psalms, he said, I quieted my soul. That's power. God has given us an intelligent mind. And by that, I don't mean that we're all on the same IQ level. What I'm saying to you is God has given us a brain. And because he's given us a brain, we have the capacity for rational thought. And because we have the capacity for rational thought, I have been given by God some measure of control over the way I respond, or at least I hope, right? I mean, I can't just go, yelling at TW and all of a sudden say, God did it. You'd call me a lunatic. No, Jason, you have control over that. That's an emotion that I just let out of whack, right? So David said, I quieted my soul. So as I began, I'm literally, man, you're getting like, I really should probably charge for this because, you're getting like 15 years of research and mistakes all thrown into one. So, and I'm still working on this stuff. So there's parts of this, and I want you to hear me. There's parts of this that I may not be all the way there yet. And so if you come to me and claim heresy, I may agree with you. I'm having to think through some of this on my own. So this was a little bit of a risk for me. I almost didn't do this, just to be honest with you, because some people can misinterpret it. But I began to understand that God gave me, based on the scriptures, God gave me a spirit. That's what goes to heaven. He gave me a soul. That's what I've got here. It's what makes me me. And then I've got a body. So how can he sanctify me with peace in my soul? So I had to realize the first thing was a shift in theology, that if I'm being transparent with you, I was doing it to myself. I was doing it to myself. Overload was something I was doing to myself because I was afraid of what might happen if I backed off and chose certain paths and didn't choose other ones. I was afraid of what if they don't need me anymore? What if my brand goes down? Who owns the brand? If I really do believe that God owns my business, and if I really do believe that God owns my family, and if I really do believe that God owns everything, I can trust him with the ability to say no, right? I can trust him with the ability to say no. So that's what I had to come to, that he's sovereign over that. I'll give you a second thing I did, a pathway out. I go to the next one there. There we go. I would say I radicalized simple routines. I began to radicalize very simple routines. So one of those things that I did was I began to walk slower, as in literally. I found myself like I would get out of my vehicle. Let's say I'm running into Kroger. And I mean, I was going. Like, hop out, go. Get into Kroger, grab a cart, because Michelle's told me to pick up something on the way home, And I didn't want to do that, but I answered the phone. And then when I did, she said, stop and pick up something. I'm going, oh, come on. I'm almost home. I know that never happens to y'all. Evidently some of y'all never argue, which I think is a lie. But I began to find myself like all day, I wasn't in a hurry in my steps. I was in a hurry in my heart. And because I was in a hurry in my heart and soul, it was manifesting itself even in the way I walk. You ever have this happen to you? Like, so let me see. I'm going to pick. I've already picked on TW. Come over here. Let me pick on TW again. All right. So you ever, and by the way, if I ever do this to y'all, please, like, don't do it hard, but grab me by the ears, just gently, and look at and right here, brother. Okay, right here. You ever see people do this? Like, they're coming up to you, and they're like, "Hey, man, you doing good? Hey, what's going on? Yeah, huh?" And you're talking, and they're constantly. Preachers are notorious for this because we're so afraid that if I don't get to say hi to Gary, that he's going to get mad at me. And then there's Joe, and then it's like, good, yeah, yes. And you're trying to tell me about how, you've been really depressed over something and something's bothered, and yeah, I get it. Hey, what's good? You doing good? And, and that's preachers. We're awful. If I ever do, you have my permission to say, brother man, I am right here, okay? I don't care about him. I don't even like Joe, all right? So just, right here. But this is it wasn't just that. What I would do is in my mind, I would be listening to Terry, but in my eyes, I'd be, out here, I'm doing what you think I should be doing, but you ever had this happen? It happens all the time. You're going, come on, deliver. I got somewhere I got to be, man. And then I would find that where I had to be really wasn't anywhere. But there was this feeling like I need to move on. I need to move on. After I was fine for the first 4 or 5 minutes. But if I could tell this thing was getting down into maybe a 10-minute conversation. So here's what I'm trying to say. You're not gone yet. So you're trying to get out of this. Yeah, you're really trying to get out of this. So what I found was, because I was living in overload, I could never really be present anywhere. You ever felt that? Like, I couldn't be present anywhere. My mind was always in transit. It was always on next. So there's somebody I heard not long ago said something that made really kind of cool. My goal is to be where my feet are. My goal is to be where my feet are. And 80% of communication is nonverbal. You know that, right? So I guarantee you that TW could tell I'm holding him back. I'm holding him back. You can feel that from people, right? Because some of them will be like, what you got? Like, I got about 5 seconds. What do you need? Or when you see, hey, TW, how you doing? And you're going, please say fine, please say fine, please say fine, please say fine, right? Okay, you can sit down now. So I held you up there a few extra minutes just to make you nervous. I'm just kidding, TW. I didn't do that. So I was in a hurry in my soul. And one of the first things I did, probably, I would say the first spiritual discipline, if you want to call it that. I don't know that anybody's ever called walking slower spiritual, but it was for me. It was for me. Because what I forced myself to do, and it was like herding cats. I would get out of my vehicle, and instantly, I'm going, and I would get out of my vehicle, and I would walk into the store. And here's the glory of it. It took maybe an extra 17 seconds from what it normally would have taken. But my heart wasn't up, so I began to walk slower. Then I began to drive slower, to the point now that I'm pretty sure that, 44% of Franklin has at some point been mad at me. I drive really slow, like bad slow. Like Michele tells me, you really need to speed up. I found myself going down, this is no lie. That's when you come full circle. I found myself going down Mac Hatcher about a month ago. I was going 35 miles an hour. 35? Now, I was in the right-hand lane, which is what you should do. But I just wasn't, I wasn't even thinking about it. I really wasn't even thinking about it. I was just driving to ClearView. And now when I get on the interstate, I'll go 75 probably. I mean, that's, but like around town, like I'm way past the grandpa, way past that. I drive pretty slow. I have to tell myself to try to keep up sometimes because I've calibrated more margin in my life, which means that on my daily plan, I try to allow time between meetings, which means that I try not to compress myself. Another thing that I did, which made a massive, massive difference in my life, was apps on my phone. I told you that for 7 weeks, I've been preaching this series on if you want your life back, you can get it. So here's what I began to notice about my life. Where's my phone? It's over here. I believe that life was great when the flip phone hit our lives. The devil came with the smartphone, all right? That's when the devil came. If you ever wonder about where you saw the devil, he showed up in iOS, okay, or Droid. Because now, whether you like it or not, our lives are in this thing. Calendars, texts, emails, to the point where now, like when you're at lunch with somebody, you ever had this happen to you? Like, well, I don't want to do that. My illustration's breaking down. So you're at lunch and you're talking. Yeah, you're listening. What you got? And so we really never get 60 seconds of uninterrupted anything, almost now. It's really difficult. So I began to notice that I was doing that. Thanks, Kim. You weirdo. God, that's so funny. That is something I would have done. That is awesome. ClearView is coming around. She said, hey, Jason, that is awesome. That's so funny. I'm going to put this thing up so I don't see it. So what I did was I realized that now I'm going to take you back about 6 months. I told you I'm a work in progress, right? So about 6 months ago, I told Michele, no, it's not true, probably April or May, so a little bit further out than that, but less than a year ago, I told Michele, I said, I'm really, really honestly considering going back to the flip phone. And she's like, that's just stupid. You can't do that. I'm like, oh, I can. And the only thing I couldn't figure out that I could live without, I do need my calendar. But I thought, really, I could go back to paper and pen. If I want it bad enough, I can do it, right? But the one thing I couldn't live, I could get TomTom back and get him back in my truck, and put that down. But the one thing that I really do need to make my life better is Evernote. My whole life is in Evernote, and it is very important to me, and I keep a lot there. So I kept the iPhone, but here's what I did. Probably in June, because this church started talking to me and I needed to pray about a lot of stuff, I took every app off my phone. Every one of them. Every single one off my phone. Except Evernote. And, well, the Maps app won't come off, I don't think. My calendar, my Maps app, Evernote. That's my home screen. And the weather. 4. Everyone else I deleted. I went into email, deleted email from my phone. Email cannot come to my phone to this day. Some of you are going, I would lose my job. No, you won't. Where is it in the contract that you signed that you have to answer email every time it goes ding, 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 ding? No, you don't have to do that, right? You don't. This is how bad it was, and I didn't know. You ready for this? So the first day that I disconnected all email from my phone, I noticed before lunch that at every single red light, I would reach for my phone and I would hit the email button. And I went, look at that. Look, it's like Pavlov's dog. It's ding, 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 ding. You know, give me the treat, give me the treat, give me the treat, give me the treat. And I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I mean, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was like that. I caught myself for 3 days. I want you to hear this. I had so preconditioned myself psychologically that when I came to red lights, that's the place I answer email. It was muscle memory, literally, constantly. I was so embarrassed. And nobody was in the truck, just me. So I radicalized a simple routine where it was fogging up my mind. Agreements, I'm not going to get off into that tonight. That's a long conversation that I'm not going to do, and I want to speed up a little bit, other than to say that I began to tell myself out loud every day. No kidding. I tell myself this every day. I am not in a hurry. I am not in a hurry. I know it's working because this is no lie. Probably like 2 or 3 months ago, I was in the kitchen and I hear Michele from the living room go, why are you not in a hurry? I had said it out loud and didn't know it. Yeah, that's age. But when I find myself getting compressed, like driving faster, or I'm not in a hurry. And it brings me back, just saying. All right, let's go to the next one. The third thing, and this is the last thing I'll tell you, I began to clarify the long game. And here's what I mean by clarify the long game. I began to look at my life with the end in mind. And so here's how kind of that got me out of the hole. When you live a life of overload, you're living in constant urgency. So every text message, everything demands your attention, and it shouts at you and it yells at you. And so I chose a path based on values. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I learned something dealing with addicts a lot as a chaplain. For 8 years, I was a chaplain, Lee Company, and I worked with a lot of addiction. And Lee Company didn't have a drug problem. It's a huge company, and it's not a church. And so, you do deal with addiction frequently. And I grew up the son of an addict. So my dad was an alcoholic, and he's been sober for almost 30 years. But I watched that up close and personal all through high school, all the way into high school. And so what I learned is that, and I saw it in addiction, dealing with it as a minister, a lot of people have this tendency to think, well, you know what, when you just want to quit, when you finally want to quit drinking beer, you'll just quit drinking beer. The very fact that they say that tells me they honestly don't know a thing about addiction. Because my dad, in the latter stages of his addiction, he didn't want to drink at all. He wasn't drinking because he liked the way it tasted. He was drinking for what it did. It numbed him for about 4 to 6 hours, 8 hours, so he could, in his mind, I can numb the hurt in my heart, in my soul, and I can go to bed. That's what he did. I don't know if you've ever known many alcoholics up close and personal, but most alcoholics like to drink alone. A lot of them, they may drink with you a little bit, but they want to drink alone. And so addiction, people who are in addiction don't party. Not in the latter stages. They don't party. They numb. They numb pain. And so if addiction is here, let's say this hand is a healthy, functional life, and this hand is a dysfunctional addiction life, as long as it's doing that right there, they're going to choose addiction every time. Something has to swing it. They have to be threatened with loss of job. They have to be threatened with loss of your wife's going to leave you, your husband's going to leave you. They have to be threatened with maybe both of those things. The pain of addiction has to get way worse than addiction itself, okay? And when it finally swings, they'll have a value change. I value wholeness more than I value what addiction is getting me right now, okay? The pain is so bad that I don't value it anymore. Okay, so for me, overload came to a place where I didn't like it. So I didn't like what I thought I was doing. We have this false sense that if I hurry, it'll buy me more time. But it's just not true. It won't. So I chose a path of different values. I began to value an ordered soul more than I valued the lifestyle I currently had. Does that make sense? I began to value an ordered soul. So I created things like mission statements and blueprints to help me think through, what do I really want? Because the reality is, wherever you're living right now with this, wherever you are right now on this spectrum, and I want you to know I'm saying this to you in love. I want you to know I'm saying this to you with genuineness of heart and love for you, because I do love you. But wherever you are right now, it's because that's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. Wherever you are right now with overload, you chose to get there. Nobody's making you answer email at 10 o'clock at night. Nobody's holding a gun to your head to answer that text while you're at lunch with somebody else. So now you've left a real human soul at a lunch to answer a digital soul. That doesn't make sense. Like, have you ever been in line somewhere? This drives me bananas. Like, you're dealing with somebody at a store, and you're going to purchase something, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and they just leave a customer with their wallet in hand to talk to a person who's asking them about store hours. They obviously don't own the business, because if they did, they're not leaving the fake person to leave the person that's got the wallet in hand. No. So wherever you are right now, the faster you can come to the brutal fact that you're there because you chose to be, that's when it'll change. It'll start to change then. I'm toting an extra 30 pounds right now. I know you can't tell it, all right? When I finally decide that I want the 30 pounds gone, they'll go. That's when they'll go. When I finally realize, nobody's shoving Little Debbie donuts down my throat. Nobody. As much as I would like to perform litigation against them for even making them, I can't, because I bought them and I ate them, right? Today, Bustle and I had a meeting. I chose to have it at Sonic at 3:30, and I ate a small blizzard. Confession's good for the soul. So, Augustine, one of those Steens. So that's what I had to do. I had a value shift. All right, thus endeth some of the practical stuff. I want to end by saying, and then we'll take questions. I want to end by saying that I'm absolutely not there. I have to fight. I knew when I came to ClearView in January that life would get really loud for me in my soul. I knew that it would. I was prepared for that. So I'll give you an example. I told Jeremy, I said, I'm going to work Fridays for the month of January, just for the month of January, till I can get my head around a few things. And it was funny because Bustle, about 3 weeks in, on Thursdays, he would say, "You got 2 more." And I'm like, "I know, I got 2 more." And then the last week comes, he's like, "Today's the last one." I'm like, "It is." But he was not going to let me go back on my word on that. And thank God for people like that, right? But I knew my soul would be compressed in the month of January, and that's okay. There's seasons that work might do that to you, but God never intended that to be a lifestyle. So I'm still a work in progress there. So I'm going to stop on my end, and then we're going to, if you got any real deep theological questions, I just hope that you understand you've just eaten chili. It might be acid reflux, so be careful before we, So, all right. What might you want to ask or say? Or yes, ma'am.
Was Michele on overload?
Oh, wow. What the question was Michele on overload? I don't know. Probably at times, because I think we all hit that. That's a good question. I need to ask her that. I'll tell her it came up. Maybe she was the reason. That's what you're really saying. Just kidding. Any other questions? Practical stuff? Maybe we didn't cover? Oh, come on. Some of y'all are just embarrassed because you. Yes, ma'am. Deborah.
You said mission statement for yourself, you personally?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have one like for your family and for your business, or is that just?
So the question was, she said, I mentioned I had a mission statement for myself. Did I have one for my family, or should we have one for our business? I'll answer that yes, to all of it, and I'll tell you why. When you have a mission statement, it tells you what to say no to. When you know exactly who you are, you predetermine what you're going to say yes to, right? So the more tight you can define who you are, then when the heat of the moment comes and that person wants to cannibalize your schedule for the day, you can say, I really can't. Or maybe you block out 2 to 3 o'clock every day to handle the X factors that come at you that day, right? There's all kinds of ways to do it. But what a mission statement did for me, and I'm actually working on my own right now with my first year at ClearView, like what are my boundaries? And I don't know them yet. Like what does God want me to tackle first and second and third, that kind of stuff. And as a team, as a staff, we're all actually doing that. And it was one of the first things I did. I said, we're going to all determine what is it what mountain we have to climb. And then if we choose to climb this mountain, it means that we're choosing not to climb other ones. And that's okay. It's really okay. Because if God is sovereign, it's really okay that we prayed about it and landed on this mountain, and this is one we're going to tackle first and not this one. It's really okay. Right? So, yes, I think mission statements are incredibly freeing. And I will say this to you about mission statements, and I really want you to hear this. They don't have to make sense to the whole world. They just have to make sense to you, right? Just to you. So, start small, and be creative, and don't try to. You ever gone into a hospital and read their mission statement? Oh, come on. They're like 1,520 words. Nobody can remember that. Nobody even tries to remember that. So I tried to boil them down into a sentence. What I ended up doing was creating what I call a value wheel. I didn't read that in the book. I don't know why I called it that, but it was just a value wheel and things that I valued so that I could measure every year. Did I hit those values? Did I do something like on my value wheels, disciple my boys? So this year I will ask myself, am I doing that? And if I'm not, it brings me back to center. But I can tell you, if you don't have, this is what I learned, Deborah, in when it comes to overcoming overload in terms of mission statements and owning your calendar and owning your own mission and owning where you want to go. Because wherever you are right now, that's where you want to be. Wherever you are, that's where you want to be. So if you don't have a clear mission of where you want to go, I promise you other people will determine that for you. They'll determine that for you. They'll take it from you. So, yeah, it really works. Good question. Other questions about some practicality stuff on it? Yes?
How do you handle the whole, what if I'm not needed anymore when I come back?
Oh, yeah. Question was, how do you handle the idea, what if I'm not needed anymore when I come back out of the hole or wherever I went to? Yeah. Wow. I had to give it up. I had to ask myself, what did I want more? I wanted an ordered soul more than I wanted to be needed by speaking gigs. that for me, it came down to, if I don't work really hard and write the next book, maybe they'll forget my name. Well, then I had to realize that was, for me, I was like, that's a carnal way to think about it, Jason. You have to look at, if God knows my name, then it really doesn't matter who else does. And so if he's the provider, and as simple as that sound, that is a tough jump to make. So, yeah. And I don't think you're ever fully over it. I mean, I have to tell myself that all the time. Yeah, great question. Any other questions?
I think it's confusing a lot of times for people to know what their part is and what God's part is.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So she said, one of the things I had to determine was God was sovereign. And sovereignty, really even what denomination you came out of can dictate what you think about sovereignty too. Sovereignty, as I see it in the Bible, is God's absolute dominion over creation, and I'm part of that creation. There's going to be people, maybe even people in this room that maybe differ on how sovereign is God, does, even like with elections, stuff like that. That's not what I was talking, and you weren't asking that, but she asked, how did I determine what sovereignty played in that role? Where I had been struggling, Heather, was that I was letting God, I believed he was sovereign over the really big stuff, but I really didn't. I think if I was honest with myself in those days, I really didn't trust him with the daily operations. I wasn't trusting him with, if you had asked me, Jason, is God in control over how much money you make? Oh, well, sure, absolutely. But if you looked at the amount of email I answered and how freaked out I got when somebody canceled a speaking request, it didn't look like I did, So sovereignty for me came in the form of either God is who he says he is, or I'm in trouble. So sovereignty for me had to come down to that he wasn't asking me if he was sovereign. He was already sovereign. I had to understand that I was living almost as if he did need some input from me from time to time. Yeah. That's not an easy one. You ask a hard one. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Tarinda, did you put her up to that? Did you just, Yeah, yeah, see, I knew you were behind that. I could tell. Tony Vaughn was over there going, don't ask him that. So, good question. Any other questions? These are good. I got time. Y'all might not, but. What? We're not in a hurry. Yeah, good, TW. Any other questions? The question was, the new series on enjoying God, am I going to talk about the sovereignty of God? Oh, it's not on the palette right now. It's really more about what does it mean to have real joy? What's the difference between that and happiness? And how do we... I'm really convicted that most Christians, and I felt this way, this is not anything to do with ClearView. This is Jason's outlook on most of evangelicals. I just think we are really too tightly wound. We really are. I just don't get it. But I've been there, I don't think we should all be corny. I'm not saying that. I just think we have a hard time laughing at ourselves. And Jesus, see, you ask a question about a sermon that's coming up. That's a bad question because you're going to get a little bit of it. Jesus, little kids loved Jesus. And there's what I know about little kids. They don't like sour people. So kids came up to Jesus. He was approachable, And I mean, when he sees Zacchaeus in the tree, you think he didn't laugh? Hey, little man, what are you doing up there? I'm short. I can't see. Well, come down. That would have been a funny conversation. Just saying. Yeah. Other questions you might have on the soul? Well, okay. Oh, I got one.
It's not a question, but now, in the book that's going on now, The Voice of God by Phyllis Schreier, and she did a little.
Oh, y'all are doing a study on this, aren't you?
Yeah, and there's the soul. If you right where I had it open, she's got the chart, and she did a very good job of trying to make that clear.
Yeah, she stole my idea. I'm home. Yeah. No, Michele is she in the room with y'all? I think so, yeah. So she was talking about how, it's the same idea. It's 1 Thessalonians over again. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that when you do understand what the soul is, you can recognize when it's not settled. And because the Lord speaks to us that way, I mean, we all know that. Well, I mean, what when you start praying for the will of God over a situation, what do you ask for? I need peace over. I don't have a peace about that yet, right? I don't have a peace about that yet. Where do you get that? In your mind and in your heart. That's the soul parts, right? So don't be afraid of it. Just be careful who you read, and don't read weird people, because they'll say weird things, and then you'll get confused. Trust the scriptures. Let me tell y'all something. Jesus, when God created us, you guys, he would not have given us a soul if he didn't want us to have one. He wouldn't have given us a soul if he didn't want us to have one. And I think that soul is most at home when it's at home with the power of the Holy Spirit residing in it. And so God uses my soul to tell me when I'm out of whack. And back in the early, 15, 16 years ago, I was way out of whack, So, all right. So you're going to think of questions. Some of you had questions that you probably just wanted to email, and not really because you're thinking, oh, wow, that's really, they're going to think I'm weird. You guys, listen to me. We are not home yet. We're not home yet. And because we're not home yet, we're not always going to have a lock on every ounce of truth. We're just not. So I'm very skeptical of people that are very legalistic because they tend to be draining. And my point in saying that is don't some of this stuff with the soul might be new to you. There was a time it was new to me. If you're not careful, it can sound touchy-feely. It can sound like messed up psychology. It can sound like a little, even for some people, it might even feel a little bit new age. That's not what I am. I know new age theology when I smell it, and it doesn't smell good. And so I can spot it. God gave you a soul, and he does mean for it to be holy and righteous and filled with the Spirit and able to not have lies and untruths outside of Scripture packed into it. And so he wouldn't have given you a soul if he didn't want you to use it. And so I would just challenge you to look to the Scriptures first. Don't read a book until you know the Scriptures. Don't go reading books until you know what the Word of God says. Because when the Word of God is your guide, then you can spot error. By the way, you know how they do, that's how they do it at the U.S. Treasury, right? So many counterfeits come out that they realized decades ago they couldn't keep up. So you know what they trained their people to do? They study the real thing all the time. Study the real thing. And the counterfeit will jump off the page to you. So study the real thing. Know the Word of God, but just know that you're just not gonna. We're just not home yet. We're all in this thing together.